Marissa heard the baby crying again. It was 3 o'clock in the morning, and the sound floated through the dark hallways like a ghost. A tiny, sad cry that made her heart hurt. She sat up in her small bed in the servants' quarters and listened. Wah, wah, wah. The cry was weak, so weak it was almost a whisper. But Marissa heard it because she had been listening for weeks now. Every single night, the same sound. A baby crying somewhere in the giant Whitfield mansion. But here was the strange part. Nobody else seemed to hear it. Or maybe they just pretended not to. Marissa was new to the mansion. She had only worked there for 2 months, cleaning the marble floors that sparkled like ice, dusting the huge chandeliers that hung from the ceilings like frozen waterfalls, and polishing the golden doorknobs until they shined. The Whitfield mansion was the fanciest house she had ever seen. It had 20 rooms, 3 staircases, and a garden so big you could get lost in it. Mr. Richard Whitfield was a rich businessman who was always traveling. His wife, Mrs. Evelyn Whitfield, was beautiful and cold, like a statue made of ice. She wore expensive dresses and diamond earrings and never smiled. Not really. Her smiles were thin and sharp, like the edge of a knife. On Marissa's first day, Mrs. Whitfield had given her one rule. Never, she said, her eyes like frozen blue lakes, go into the East Wing. That area is private. Do you understand? Marissa had nodded quickly. Yes, ma'am. Good. If I find you there, you'll be fired immediately. That was it. No explanation. Just a warning. For 2 months, Marissa obeyed. She cleaned the West Wing, the main halls, the kitchen, the library, and the enormous dining room. She never went near the East Wing. But every night, she heard the crying. At first, she thought it was her imagination. Maybe the wind, maybe a cat outside, but the sound was too clear, too human. It was definitely a baby. She asked the cook, Mrs. Chun, about it one morning while preparing breakfast. Do the Whitfields have a baby? Marissa whispered. Mrs. Chen's face went stiff. She didn't look up from the eggs. She was scrambling. Don't ask questions, she said quietly. Just do your work. But I hear crying every night. Marissa, Mrs. Chen's voice was sharp now. If you want to keep this job, you will mind your own business. Understand? Marissa understood. But understanding didn't make the crying stop. Understanding didn't stop her heart from breaking every time she heard that sad, lonely sound in the middle of the night. Tonight was different, though. Tonight, the crying was weaker than ever before. It sounded like the baby didn't have much strength left. Marissa pulled on her robe and slippers. Her hands were shaking. She knew what she was about to do was dangerous. She could lose her job. She could get in serious trouble. But what if a baby was hurt? What if someone needed help? She couldn't just lie in bed and do nothing. Marissa crept out of her room and tiptoed to the dark hallways. The mansion felt different at night. Bigger, emptier, scarier. The moonlight came through the tall windows and made strange shadows on the walls. She followed the sound of crying. It led her to the East Wing. Her heart pounded in her chest like a drum. The East Wing was completely dark. No lights. No sound except for that tiny, heartbreaking cry. Wah, wah. The sound was coming from behind a door at the end of the hallway. Marissa walked closer. Her legs felt like jelly. Her mouth was dry. She reached the door. It was painted white, just like all the others, but somehow it looked scarier. Her hand touched the cold doorknob. Please don't let me get in trouble, she whispered to herself. Please let everything be okay. She turned the knob. The door opened. The room was freezing cold. Marissa gasped. It was like stepping into a refrigerator. Why was it so cold? The window was wide open, and the winter wind was blowing in, making the curtains dance like ghosts. In the middle of the room was a crib. Marissa's heart stopped. She rushed forward and looked inside. There he was, a tiny baby boy. He couldn't have been more than 3 months old. His skin was brown like Marissa's, but it looked gray and pale, like he was sick. His little body was so thin she could see his ribs. He was wrapped in a dirty blanket that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. The baby's eyes were half closed. He was barely crying anymore, just making weak little sounds. "Oh, no," Marissa whispered. Tears filled her eyes. "Oh, baby. Oh, sweet baby." She reached down and touched his tiny hand. It was ice cold. That's when she saw it. Next to the crib, on a small table, was a syringe, a needle, and a small bottle with liquid inside. Marissa's blood turned to ice. Something was very, very wrong here. "What are you doing in here?" The voice came from behind her, cold and sharp as a knife. Marissa spun around. Mrs. Evelyn Whitfield stood in the doorway. She was wearing a silk robe, and her blonde hair was perfect even though it was the middle of the night. But her eyes were like stones. Cold, hard, angry. "I heard crying," Marissa stammered. "The baby. He needs help. He's so cold and he looks sick and—" "Get away from him," Mrs. Whitfield said. Her voice was calm, but it was the kind of calm that's more frightening than screaming. "But, ma'am, he needs a doctor. He's freezing, and I saw the needle and—" "I said get away from him." Mrs. Whitfield walked into the room. She moved slowly like a cat stalking a mouse. She stood between Marissa and the crib. "This is none of your concern," she said. "You were told never to come to the East Wing. You have broken the rules. But the baby is fine." "He's not fine." Marissa's voice was shaking, but she couldn't stop herself. "He's freezing. He's starving. What is that needle for? What are you doing to him?" For a moment, something flickered in Mrs. Whitfield's eyes. Something dark and terrible. Then she smiled. That thin, knife-edged smile. "You should go back to your room, Marissa," she said softly. "And you should forget what you saw here. If you tell anyone at all, I will make sure you never work in the city again. Do you understand?" Behind her, the baby made another weak cry. Marissa looked at Mrs. Whitfield. She looked at the baby. She looked at the syringe. And in that moment, Marissa made a choice. She ran, not toward her room, not toward the door. She ran to the telephone on the hallway table just outside the room. "Stop," Mrs. Whitfield shouted. But Marissa was already grabbing the phone. Her fingers shook as she dialed. 911. "What are you doing?" Mrs. Whitfield lunged forward. The phone rang once. Twice. 911, what's your emergency? Please. Marissa cried into the phone. "There's a baby. He's dying. Please send help." Mrs. Whitfield grabbed Marissa's arm, trying to pull the phone away. But Marissa held on tight. She held on for the baby, who couldn't hold on anymore. She held on because someone had to. "Please," she sobbed into the phone. "Please hurry. He's just a baby. Please save him." "Ma'am, I need you to stay calm," the 911 operator said. Her voice was steady and strong, like an anchor in a storm. "Can you tell me your location?" "The Whitfield mansion." Marissa shouted into the phone. Mrs. Whitfield was pulling at her arm, her nails digging into Marissa's skin. 127 Riverside Drive. "Please, the baby is dying." "Let go of that phone right now." Mrs. Whitfield's voice was no longer calm. It was full of rage. "Ma'am, what is your name?" the operator asked. "Marissa? My name is Marissa Thompson." Mrs. Whitfield yanked harder, and the phone cord stretched tight. For a moment, Marissa thought it would rip right out of the wall. "Marissa, help is on the way," the operator said. "Can you tell me about the baby? Is he breathing?" "Barely." Marissa cried. "He's so cold and thin, and there's a needle here, and—" Mrs. Whitfield finally ripped the phone from Marissa's hand and slammed it down. The sound echoed through the hallway like a gunshot. For a moment, the two women just stared at each other. Mrs. Whitfield's perfect face was twisted with fury. Her chest was rising and falling fast. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" she hissed. "I saved a baby's life." Marissa shouted back. She was surprised by her own voice. She had never shouted at anyone before, especially not someone rich and powerful like Mrs. Whitfield. "You've ruined everything." Mrs. Whitfield's hands were shaking. "That baby, he's a mistake. A burden. He wasn't supposed to be here." Marissa felt like she'd been punched in the stomach. What do you mean? Mrs. Whitfield's laugh was cold and bitter. My husband had an affair. That baby is the proof. Do you understand? Every time I look at him, I see my husband's betrayal. I see everything I'm supposed to be grateful for turned into a nightmare. Marissa couldn't believe what she was hearing. So you heard him? You left him in the cold? You used that needle on him? I gave him something to help him sleep, Mrs. Whitfield said, her voice dropping to a whisper, so I wouldn't have to hear him cry, so I could have peace in my own house. That's not medicine for babies. Marissa said, her voice cracking, that could kill him. Maybe that would be better, Mrs. Whitfield said quietly. The words hung in the air like poison. Marissa felt tears streaming down her face. How can you say that? He's just a baby. He didn't do anything wrong. He didn't ask to be born. Neither did I ask for him to ruin my life. In the distance, Marissa heard the most beautiful sound in the world. Sirens. Mrs. Whitfield heard them too. Her face went pale. No, she whispered. No, no, no. She turned and ran back into the baby's room. Marissa followed her, her heart pounding. Mrs. Whitfield was grabbing the syringe and the bottle. Try to hide them. Don't touch those. Marissa screamed. The police need to see them. Shut up. Mrs. Whitfield shoved the needle into her robe pocket. The sirens were getting louder. Red and blue lights flashed through the windows, painting the walls in bright colors. Marissa ran back to the crib. The baby's eyes were closed now. His little chest was barely moving. Please hold on, she whispered to him. Help is coming. Please hold on. She heard footsteps running up the stairs. Loud voices. The front door banging open. Police? Where's the emergency? Up here. Marissa screamed. In the east wing. Please hurry. 3 police officers rushed into the room, followed by 2 paramedics carrying big bags of medical equipment. Ma'am, step back from the crib, one of the officers said to Marissa. She moved aside, and the paramedics rushed forward. One of them, a kind-looking woman with gray hair, gently lifted the baby out of the crib. Oh, my God, the paramedic whispered. He's hypothermic. Temperature is way too low. He's severely malnourished. The other paramedic, a young man with quick hands, was already wrapping the baby in warm blankets and checking his tiny heartbeat. Pulse is weak but steady, he said. We need to get him to the hospital now. Wait, Marissa said. Mrs. Whitfield. She has a needle in her pocket. She said she gave him something to make him sleep. All the police officers turned to look at Mrs. Whitfield. She stood frozen by the wall, her face white as paper. I don't know what she's talking about. Ma'am, can you empty your pockets, please? One of the officers said. He was tall and serious, with a deep voice. This is my house, Mrs. Whitfield said, her voice shaking. You can't just... Ma'am, a child's life is in danger. We have probable cause. Empty your pockets, or we'll do it for you. For a moment, Marissa thought Mrs. Whitfield would refuse. She could see the woman thinking, calculating, trying to find a way out. But there was no way out. Slowly, Mrs. Whitfield reached into her robe pocket and pulled out the syringe and the small bottle. The officer took them carefully, holding them up to the light. His face went hard. What is this? He asked. Mrs. Whitfield didn't answer. The female paramedic looked at the bottle and gasped. This is ketamine, veterinary strength. This is what you give to horses, not babies. Oh, my God, one of the other officers whispered. The tall officer looked at Mrs. Whitfield with disgust. Ma'am, you're under arrest for child endangerment and possession of a controlled substance. You have the right to remain silent. I want my lawyer, Mrs. Whitfield interrupted. Her voice was cold again. Empty. Of course you do, the officer said. He pulled out handcuffs and walked toward her. Marissa watched as they put the handcuffs on Mrs. Whitfield's thin wrists. The diamond bracelet sparkled next to the cold metal. We need to go now, the young paramedic shouted. He was already moving toward the door with the baby wrapped in blankets. Wait. Marissa called out. What's his name? Does he have a name? The female paramedic looked sad. According to the birth certificate we found in the room, his name is Caleb. Caleb Whitfield. Caleb, the baby finally had a name in Marissa's heart. Is he going to be okay? Marissa asked, her voice breaking. The paramedic looked at her with gentle eyes. I don't know, honey. He's in bad shape, but we're going to fight for him. Thanks to you, he has a chance. They rushed out of the room, carrying little Caleb toward the ambulance. Marissa stood there, her legs shaking so badly she thought she might fall down. Another police officer, a woman with kind eyes, put a hand on her shoulder. You did good tonight, she said. You saved that baby's life. You were very brave. Marissa started to cry. All the fear, all the tension, all the horror of what she'd seen came pouring out. She cried for Caleb. She cried for herself. She cried because sometimes doing the right thing is the hardest thing in the world. The officer let her cry. She didn't rush her. She just stood there, a steady presence in the chaos. Outside, the ambulance siren started up again, carrying Caleb away to safety. Inside, police officers were taking photographs of the cold room, the empty crib, the open window. They were collecting evidence, building a case, making sure Mrs. Whitfield would face justice. And Marissa stood in the middle of it all, knowing that nothing would ever be the same again. But she had done the right thing. She had listened when no one else would. She had acted when no one else dared. She had saved a life. Three days passed before Marissa got the phone call. She was sitting in her small room at the mansion, staring at the wall. She hadn't slept much. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Caleb's tiny, pale face. She heard his weak cries. She wondered if he was still alive. The other servants whispered about her in the hallways. Some called her a hero. Others said she should have minded her own business. Mrs. Chim brought her soup and squeezed her hand but didn't say much. The mansion felt empty without Mrs. Whitfield. Mr. Richard Whitfield had come home the day after the arrest. He looked like a broken man, his expensive suit wrinkled, his eyes red from crying. He had walked past Marissa without saying a word. When the phone rang, Marissa jumped. Her hand shook as she picked it up. Hello, is this Marissa Thompson? It was a woman's voice, warm and professional. Yes, this is Marissa. This is Dr. Sarah Martinez from St. Joseph's Hospital. I'm calling about baby Caleb. Marissa's heart stopped. Is he alive? He's alive, Dr. Martinez said, and Marissa heard the smile in her voice. And he's getting stronger every day. Marissa burst into tears. She couldn't help it. Relief flooded through her body like warm water. Oh, thank God, she sobbed. Thank God. Thank God. He's a fighter, Dr. Martinez continued. When he came in, his body temperature was dangerously low. He was severely underweight and dehydrated. But we've been warming him slowly, feeding him carefully, and giving him round-the-clock care. Yesterday, he opened his eyes and looked right at me. Today, he smiled. He smiled. Marissa whispered. He smiled. And I wanted to call and tell you, because the police told us what you did. You saved his life. Marissa, if you had waited even one more day, we don't think you would have made it. Marissa couldn't speak. She just cried and cried. There's something else, Dr. Martinez said gently. We ran tests on the drug that was given to him. It was veterinary ketamine, meant for large animals. The dose Mrs. Whitfield was giving him could have stopped his breathing at any moment. You didn't just save him from the cold and hunger. You saved him from being poisoned. Marissa felt sick to her stomach. How could anyone do that to a baby? What's going to happen to him now? She asked. Mr. Whitfield has been here every day, Dr. Martinez said. He's taking full responsibility for Caleb's care. He's arranged for the best pediatric specialists. He's becoming the father Caleb deserves. After she hung up, Marissa sat in silence for a long time. Then she heard a knock on her door. Come in, she said, wiping her eyes. The door opened, and Mr. Richard Whitfield stood there. He looked different than before. Older, but somehow more real. More human. Marissa, he said quietly. May I speak with you? Of course, sir. He came in and sat down on the small chair by her desk. For a moment, he didn't say anything. He just looked at his hands. I owe you everything, he finally said. You saved my son's life. I just did what anyone would do, Marissa said. No, he shook his head. Most people would have looked the other way. Most people would have been too scared to act. But you weren't. You were braver than I ever was. He took a deep breath. I was a coward, Marissa. I knew about Caleb. I knew he was my son. But when my wife said she wanted to handle it, I let her. I traveled for work. I pretended everything was fine. I chose my comfortable life over my own child. Tears rolled down his face. A rich, powerful man crying in a servant's room. I'll never forgive myself for that, he said. But I'm going to spend the rest of my life making it right. Caleb is coming home next week, and I'm going to be the father he deserves. That's good, Marissa said softly. That's really good. Mr. Whitfield looked at her. I want you to stay, Marissa, not as a maid, as Caleb's caregiver, his nanny. He'll need someone who loves him, someone who fought for him. Will you stay? Marissa's heart felt full. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll stay. 2 months later, everything had changed. The East Wing was no longer cold and dark. Mr. Whitfield had transformed it completely. The walls were painted soft yellow, like sunshine. There were toys everywhere, stuffed animals, colorful blocks, and a mobile that played gentle music. The window was fixed so it would never stay open to cold again. And in the middle of the room was a beautiful new crib with warm, clean blankets. Most importantly, the room was full of love. Marissa sat in the rocking chair, holding Caleb in her arms. He was 3 months older now, 5 months total, and he looked completely different. His cheeks were round and pink. His eyes were bright and curious. He had gained weight, and his laugh was the most beautiful sound Marissa had ever heard. Look at you, she cooed, those who cannot speak for themselves. Touching his tiny nose. Look at my strong, healthy boy. Caleb grabbed her finger and held on tight. His grip was strong now. Everything about him was stronger. Mr. Whitfield came into the room, carrying a bottle of warm milk. He smiled when he saw them. How's he doing? He asked. Perfect, Marissa said. Absolutely perfect. Mr. Whitfield sat down next to them and gently took Caleb into his arms. The baby looked up at his father and smiled, that incredible smile that made everything worth it. I never thought I could love someone this much, Mr. Whitfield said quietly. Every morning I wake up, and I can't believe I almost lost him. I can't believe I was so blind. You're here now, Marissa said. That's what matters. My lawyer called today, Mr. Whitfield said. Evelyn's trial is next month. They have so much evidence. The drugs, the conditions he was kept in, everything. Her lawyer is trying to work out a plea deal, but the prosecutor isn't interested. She's in a prison for a long time. Marissa nodded. Part of her felt sad for Mrs. Whitfield. Sad that someone could be so broken inside that they would hurt an innocent baby. But mostly, she felt glad that justice was happening. And I have news for you, Mr. Whitfield said, looking at Marissa with a gentle smile. I spoke with my lawyer about making it official. I want you to be Caleb's godmother. Legally, if anything ever happens to me, you'll be his guardian. You'll make sure he's loved and protected. Marissa's eyes filled with tears. Really, your family now, Marissa, not an employee. Family. That evening, as the sun set and painted the sky orange and pink, Marissa carried Caleb out to the garden. Mr. Whitfield walked beside them. The garden was beautiful in the spring. Flowers were blooming everywhere. Roses, tulips, daisies. Butterflies danced through the air. It felt like the whole world was celebrating new life. Caleb reached out his tiny hands toward a yellow butterfly. His eyes were wide with wonder. Everything is beautiful to him, Marissa said. Everything is new and wonderful. That's because he gets a fresh start, Mr. Whitfield said. We all do. They sat on a bench together, watching Caleb discover the world. He touched a flower petal and laughed. He felt the soft grass and made a surprised sound. Every little thing was an adventure. You know what I learned? Mr. Whitfield said quietly. All my money, all my success, all the things I thought mattered, none of it means anything compared to this. Compared to watching my son laugh. Compared to knowing he's safe and loved. Marissa smiled. That's the most important kind of wealth. Yes, he agreed. Yes, it is. 6 months later, on a bright autumn morning, something magical happened. Caleb took his first steps. Marissa was sitting on the floor of the nursery, her arms stretched out. Mr. Whitfield was behind Caleb, holding him steady. Come on, baby, Marissa said, her voice full of excitement. You can do it. Come to Marissa. Caleb stood there, wobbling a little. He looked at Marissa. He looked at his father. Then, with a determined look on his face, he lifted one foot, then the other. 1 step, 2 steps, 3 steps. He walked right into Marissa's arms. You did it, Marissa cried, scooping him up and spinning him around. You walked. Oh, Caleb, you wonderful, amazing boy. Mr. Whitfield was crying and laughing at the same time. He walked. Did you see that? He walked. Caleb laughed. That bright, joyful laugh that filled the whole room with happiness. Mrs. Chun came running in, hearing the excitement. What happened? He walked. Marissa shouted. Caleb walked. Mrs. Chun clapped her hands. Oh, what a special day. They all celebrated together. This unlikely family that had formed through crisis and courage. A father who had learned what really mattered. A caregiver who had risked everything for love. And a baby who had survived the impossible and was now thriving, taking steps into a bright new future. That night, after Caleb was asleep in his crib, warm, safe, and loved, Marissa stood by the window and looked out at the stars. She thought about that terrible night when she heard the crying. She thought about how scared she had been, how uncertain. She had been just a maid in a fancy house, someone small and powerless. But she had learned something important. You don't have to be big or powerful to make a difference. You just have to care. You just have to listen. You just have to be brave enough to act when others won't. Caleb stirred in his sleep and made a soft, happy sound. Not a cry this time. A sigh of contentment. Marissa smiled. The mansion that had once held such dark secrets was now filled with light. The rooms that had echoed with loneliness now rang with laughter. The cold, empty spaces had become warm and full of life, and a baby who had almost been lost forever was now walking, growing, and thriving. Proof that love can heal even the deepest wounds. Marissa walked over to the crib and gently touched Caleb's soft hair. Sweet dreams, little one, she whispered. You're safe now. You're loved. And I'll always be here to protect you. Outside, the moon shone bright and full. Inside, a family slept peacefully. And in the silence of the night, there was no crying. Only peace. Only love. Only hope for tomorrow. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Subscribe for more powerful stories that remind us that courage and compassion can change everything. And leave a comment below. Tell us, what would you have done in Marissa's place? Remember, the smallest voice can carry the greatest truth. Never be afraid to speak up for